awesome! This usually works. Goodbye.
Hello everybody. I tend to find that when you play a video in front of an audience, either everybody falls asleep or they wake up, but I can see everybody's eyes, so I think we're pretty good. Is everything awesome? Excellent, we have a responsive audience, I like it. Okay. So you've just seen a whole bunch of footage, and I've just heard that I have your attention, which is good. But I'd like to start talking about quite a few things. We're going to talk about Hollywood a little bit. We're going to talk about some of the biggest animation companies in the world: Pixar, Disney, Industrial Light and Magic, Weta. We're going to talk about the Lego Movie, The Matrix, you've just seen some of that stuff now, The Great Gatsby, and we're going to relate that to information technology and everybody's favourite, math and physics. Yeah, that's right, exactly. That's actually a pretty good response. Normally there's more booing than yaying, but that's really good. I always yay if somebody asks me if I like math, because I love it. And we're going to talk about great work and great people and the year 1991. So the first thing I'd like to do is explain to you how all those things are related. So I work for a company called Animal Logic, as you saw on the logo before. Animal Logic was founded in 1991. The same year that the internet was released, the same year that the Amiga 500 was released, the 486 CPU, okay, I won't get too nerdy about it, but basically there are quite a few things. It's a very important year for computers. But we also started at that same time, so we captured, we were there right from the start of the explosion that's been information technology and visualization. We work on Hollywood feature films, almost exclusively now. And we've worked on such projects as I've already mentioned. You can read them there for yourself. We have a staff between about 250 and 550 people situated in Fox Studios in Sydney. And we also have an LA office, but the majority of the work is done right here in Sydney. We're also an internationally recognised and Academy Award-winning company. We won an Animation Academy Award for Happy Feet. We consist of artists, mathematicians, animators. We have a huge range of different people. It's not all one and it's not all the other. There's a healthy mix of artistic and technical people. And the artistic people are backed by a heavy technical background, which is what I'm going to talk to you about today. Our fundamental job is to service the vision of a director. So we are making films. That's the first and foremost thing that we're doing. A director is responsible for how that film gets made and the vision behind it. And it's our job to assist them in making that become a reality. And as our CEO, Zare Nalbandian, says, great work involves great people, and that's what we're all about every day. So who am I? So I'm secondary to the company that I work for as far as this presentation. I'm going to try and keep it fairly brief about myself, but I'd like to tell you a little story because my career started much like all of your careers may start. It actually started a career fair very similar to this, where Rising Sun Pictures from Adelaide, I'm originally from Adelaide, was giving a presentation relatively similar to this. And after the presentation, you can't steal this, this is my idea, okay? So don't use this in the future. But I approached and I said, on your website, it says that you require about 3 years of experience to do an internship. So I said, that means that you can never hire anybody new. And after the silence, I said, well, I'll let you rectify that. If you hire me, I can show you that it doesn't have to be just people who are already in the industry, because let's face it, if you're already in the industry, you're not going to be applying for an internship. So they hired me, and my first job was working on Lord of the Rings: Return of the King as a coordinator. So it paid off because all of this stuff is just problem solving, right? So I just had to figure out a way of solving that problem. I moved on after Rising Sun Pictures in Adelaide to Sydney to work for a company called Dr. D Studios on Happy Feet 2. Then after that, I did a short stint at Flying Bark Studios, where I met a person who changed my career later on, working on a project, Blinky Bill, which will be coming out as a feature film. And then I also did a short stint working on the iOS platform, doing phone and iPad software, because I really think that it's really good to have a broad range of background behind anything that you're doing. It's really important to be able to sort of, these days with technology, things are progressing so fast. It's really good to have a good background in many different areas. I joined the Animal Logic team in 2013, working on the Lego film. I was brought in to basically work on rendering technology and working on making sure that we were rendering as efficiently as possible and delivering the final look on time. I am also very active in extracurricular activities. I've met a couple of you before, and some of you have said that you're interested in things like music and stuff like that. I have interest in music and electronics, and I think that these things are really key to actually broadening out the creative part of the job, because even though I'm fundamentally a programmer, I have a very technical job. I'm interacting with creative people all the time. So bringing those hobbies into my everyday work is actually quite useful, and it helps me interact with these people much more closely. So now I'm going to talk about a few different things behind what we do. So one interesting analogy behind what we do is to think about the difference between a painter and the paintbrush. The person that made the paintbrush is a technical person, you could say, I guess. But fundamentally, they still have skill sets that overlap to produce the image. And because of that, it's just as important to make a good paintbrush as it is to be a good artist. So you could really say that the information technology and computing aspects of what we do is very similar to the art of making paintbrushes. And in our case, we just have artists that do something slightly different. They might do animation, they may do texture painting, whatever, but we're still backing those tools with support technically. So we'll go on to the next slide, but that slide that you just saw before, it's okay, you don't have to go back. The top image is basically the modeling stage, like a very raw image, and then underneath it is a final frame. And I'm going to go through a couple of things a bit later that explain kind of how we get from one to the other. Now, you might not have even thought about visual effects as a career path. In fact, it might not have even been really obvious that when you watch a film, you may not be thinking about how it's actually done, or maybe you are, which is good. But there's a whole range of different possibilities for you these days. Every time you pick up a phone, there's a range of visualization things going on. There's somebody that's been involved in making the interface. There's somebody who's making it look pretty artistically. There are so many opportunities for visualization, and it's possible that these days, because you see it so much, you might discount it as something that's a valid career path, but it really is. Why would you choose visual effects over any of the things I've just described? Well, it shares a lot of similarities, but it also has some differences. It's a fun, exciting, fast-paced and creative industry. It has global reach. There's many different places you can work. And if you're into travel, it's fantastic. If, like me, you're a little bit more boring and like to stay in Sydney, you can do that too. I've spent a long time here in different companies, and I've enjoyed it immensely. But what do we look for when we're hiring people to work with us? Well, we look for good communication skills, because we have a lot of people to communicate with. As I mentioned before, we range between about 250 and 550 people at the Fox Studios office in Sydney. Ability to collaborate, because often we're working on fairly large projects that involve a lot of different pieces, and if one of those pieces falls down, then obviously it brings down the whole, so it has to work like a well-oiled machine. We need good time management skills, because we do things to a time budget and an actual budget, and good multitasking skills. And a passion for computers, problem solving and creative thinking, and obviously a passion for math and physics, because they're very relevant. So what courses did we study? I think potentially it's the wrong and the right question to be asking. I'm not going to go through all of them, but this is basically a walkthrough of the top level at our Fox office, asking everybody, what did you do at university? and how did it bring you to what you're doing? So these are the results that I got. But as amazing as some of those histories are, what also hit me was that one of the people that I work with has just a high school education, and then basically left and got really passionate about what he does at home, which is an equally valid way to go. But in my case, in Adelaide Uni, I did mathematics and computer sciences and found that because it taught me technical background and how to solve problems really well, it was extremely useful in the job that I do now. So I would really highly recommend that if you're going to get into a technical industry like that you get a good, solid background and foundation. So I think I'm talking slower than I did before, so I'll try and speed up a little bit. I'm going to go through really quickly two different things that we do. One is called effects, and the other is called animation. Starting with effects, it's basically the job of teaching a computer to be a creative assistant. So what we're doing is we're teaching the computers to do stuff that would be really hard for us to do, like simulating water or simulating smoke or these sort of things. Computers are good at this because they're good at processing large amounts of numbers, which we're not really that fantastic at doing. If you try to do any of this with a calculator, you can see that that's going to take quite some time. So this requires a really good understanding of mathematics and physics, because the real world is governed by maths and physics, and if you don't understand how the real world works, how are you going to fool somebody into actually believing that what you're showing them is real? Because fundamentally, if we do a good job, you can't actually tell that we've done anything. And you can only do that if it matches the real world. To do this, we simulate things like fire, water, things that are actually quite engineering in background to some degree. Simulate things like gravity, make things break apart, and I'm going to show you 3 animations of different tests we did on the Lego film that kind of show the development of some of those ideas in actual shots. So if we just roll that first animation. So that's blowing up a clock tower because, I mean, seriously, who doesn't like explosions? I'm not even sure that shot was actually in the film. It's just artists sitting around saying, let's blow something up and see that it all works, and clearly it does. So we go to the next one. So that's one great example of the combination between artistic and technical solutions. We wanted everything to be made of bricks in the Lego film, so how do you do water? Because water isn't really made of bricks. So the effects team came up with that simulation as an excellent way of kind of getting the effect that they wanted. We can roll the last one. And knocking things down is just as exciting as explosions, let's face it. Okay, so now moving on to animation. So animation is quite an interesting one. I guess one way of describing animation would be magical, because you're taking an inanimate object, something that's inside of a computer, and you're making people identify with it, you're bringing it life, you're actually telling somebody a story through a character. But that involves as much thought and creative thinking from the technical side as it does from the artistic side. So what we're doing from the IT perspective in animation is to build tools that the animators want to use. And to do that, we build something called a rig, which is kind of like a mannequin, or like one of those small wooden sculptures or metal sculptures that you can pose. But we build it inside the computer. I'm going to show you 3 animations related to that. And then we give the animators the ability to use a mouse to basically click on different joints and then move them around. But that doesn't sound very advantageous to do on a computer until you consider that all the frames in between key poses are able to be calculated by a computer. We can add cloth moving around, wind, and all that stuff, which would be very time-consuming to do manually. So if we can run the first animation, it's just what we'd call a walk cycle. It was from the Lego film very early on, to figure out how to deal with making things move rigidly, because we didn't want to bend any of the limbs. So again, this is a creative solution to a fundamentally technical problem. Roll the next one. So this is an example of an animator working on an actual shot for the actual film, and you can see that they're moving the mouse to actually move a chain to do the animation for the chain. And as you'll notice that as they're moving it around, the computer's calculating how to actually position the chain so that it would hang like that in real life, so that they can concentrate more on what it's actually going to look like and not have to worry so much about whether it's actually going to be realistic or not, because the computer will figure that out for them. If we can go to the last one. This is an in-house system that we developed to do facial animation. Basically, it draws a two-dimensional view on the left-hand side of the screen. On the right-hand side of the screen, as the animator is animating the face shapes, it's actually updating on that itself. And this is an excellent example of the type of software that we would actually produce in-house that we don't actually buy externally. We'll actually spend time customizing it simply because if we have exactly what our animators want to use, it allows them to do work faster. And so you can see there's various tools for smoothing out the shape of the face and sort of hitting the target that the animator wants to hit so that we can tell the story that we want to tell and the character can give the right performance at the right time. Now, that's only two disciplines of many different disciplines involved in filmmaking. A really quick run through would be, and I won't go into detail, would be storyboarding, then you would do layout, then you do modeling, animation, texturing, shading, rendering, compositing. There's actually a lot involved in this process. So there's a lot of opportunities for people to get involved in filmmaking. But all of them incorporate a technical background and a technical basis. They have mathematical tools, they have physics tools involved. As you can see, there's a lot of actual work involved in doing it, and it involves a very tight coupling between that creative and technical aspect. I'm going to show you a video now that sort of fills in a little bit more of what I was saying. And that video is from Legend of the Guardians Hours of Gaul, which was done in-house at Animalogic. And it showcases a whole bunch of different things. It shows you very early storyboards, which is traditionally drawn, hand-drawn work, all the way up to the final shots, which are lit and rendered. So if we can run that now, thanks.
Feel the gutters, the currents in the rain, a scupper, a swillage, baggy wrinkles.
Baggy wrinkles? He could have at least given us a vocabulary list.
Now this is the way to learn.
Oh yes, this is exactly how I want to learn. In the monsoon.
The air currents warm in different ways, you see, from the sky to the ocean. You can't fight them, you have to feel them with your gizzards. Aha! You see that one? Soren, see it, it's there. Go for it. That's it. Use your gizzard, boy. Thrust it. Fly inside. He sees it. He sees it. Hold it. Hold it.
Take that!
So I won't end it just there just yet. Thank you anyway very much for listening, in case I don't get the chance to thank you after questions. Hope you have a really great day, and if you want to come and chat to us at any stage, feel free to do so. Ask any questions that you want. But now I'd like to open up to questions. I think we've got almost 10 minutes. So let's start with, I saw a hand go up at the back first. So let's go with, sorry. Going to give that guy further to walk now. Make him earn his keep. Thank you.
In regards to your 3D modeling software, what exactly do you use?
So generally I find that quite an interesting question, because fundamentally it generally doesn't matter so much. We focus more on the artistry than the software. What you saw there was a combination of XSI, Softimage XSI and Maya, but there are various different tools that we'll use. I would say the answer to that question is generally what best suits the particular problem we're trying to solve. So most of our animators have used pretty much every piece of current software available to do modeling. And we just choose what's relevant at the time. I saw second hands go up somewhere in the middle there, I think.
How long would it take to fully animate a movie like the Guardians one or the Lego movie?
The entire film?
Like the entire film.
Including all the revisions? Probably hundreds of thousands of man-hours. I would say, because it's very difficult to say, obviously, per person. Obviously, one person isn't doing the entire thing. So there's two answers to the question. The answers would be, how long does it take if you think about one person's day, probably somewhere between 6 months and 2 years, depending on how complicated the film is. But if you added up all of the people together and did back-to-back, it's a really long time. It would be definitely in the hundreds of thousands of hours, I would say. Probably get someone from over here. This side is so inactive. What are you doing? There's a couple more over on that side. How much what, sorry? Well, of course, it depends on the size of the explosion. So if you look at the one that we just did there, probably actually not that very long. I mean, when I compare what things were like in 1991, when the internet wasn't even around, I certainly couldn't pick up a phone and do this, because it would have taken 3 days just to turn on. But these days we can do that almost in real time. So that explosion would be very close to being real time. To do it to a final level would maybe be somewhere between a few minutes and maybe an hour at the worst. In terms of how much that costs, the hourly rate times by 1, something like that. Actually, no, let's go over this side. Yeah, they've been waiting.
How much would you get paid per film?
How much do I get paid per film, or how much does everybody get paid per film? You'll have to ask the accounting department. I'm sorry, I can't answer that. I can put you in contact with them, but I mean, it's confidential, but I think that how much does the overall film cost? I mean, it varies between probably 20 million and 150 million kind of, but that's public information, so you can look that stuff up. It varies a lot, basically, but it's generally in the tens to hundreds of millions. But that's definitely not how much I get paid. Let's stick with another one over here.
On larger movies, Animal Logic does, such as Lego movies, how many people probably in total would you have working on it?
Right. So in that case, we're probably, as I said, we're scaling up between 250 to say 550 and maybe further. But at the peak, which would be generally towards when we're delivering, or in the middle when the bulk of the work is done, around 500 people, I'd say, is probably a pretty good estimate. 300 to 500. Yeah, let's go here.
When you first approached that stall holder at the conference thing that you went to back in the day, what was your point of differentiation? I mean, based on what you said, you didn't have a lot of experience. So what did you say in terms of what you had to offer that made you stand out?
I would say surprisingly little, but I think what probably ended up converting that into an actual job would have been persistence, and persistence in as non-annoying way as possible. So what my approach was, I called the company every Tuesday at the same time, every single week, which sounds really irritating, but it really depends what you talk about. So they thankfully they kept taking my calls for probably about a month, and then eventually I think just to stop me from calling them, they asked me to come in, and that's pretty much how it worked. But in terms of what my differentiating factor may have been, potentially the fact that I'd had that university background, and I think it shows that you can stick with something for an extended period of time and finish it. And if you finish it well, it also proves that you can finish stuff, which is actually, I think, something a lot of people struggle with. Yeah, I think that's it. Well, that's actually quite a good question. I'll try and keep it brief. So we have, I'm not sure if I can say exactly how many, but a large number of machines housed in a warehouse in Fox Studios. I think if you look on a world basis, you'll have anywhere between 10 and maybe even up to 100,000 individual computers. Each one of those would have, numerous CPUs. So a large number of CPUs, lots of memory. And sorry, did you ask how long a frame would take to? What was your other question? We try and do that as little as possible, because I guess when you think about the way that a project like the space shuttle runs, they want reliability. And if you're working on a project that goes for more than a year, you really don't want suddenly an update to ruin all the work that you've done, or suddenly you can't use a piece of software. So we try and fix the software versions where possible. If a new feature comes out that we need, then we'll update, but not as often as you may expect.
When did you first have your first interest in animation?
So that goes back to the first time I saw Terminator 2, which very embarrassingly, and I guess we'll see if it's amusingly, my parents actually taped it on VHS, which was still a thing, and they edited it manually to remove all the violence, because that's how sheltered that I am, right? Which really doesn't leave very much visual effects. I mean, it's like a couple of seconds of someone going, ah, and then that's sort of it. But for the limited amount of stuff that I saw, I just knew by looking at it that it's something that interested me, and I just couldn't understand how they did it. And so I guess you could say I dedicated the rest of the time that I had to answering that problem. Maybe up the back. There's a wavy hand up there. Yeah.
What were your experiences like working at the different studios?
Generally really good. I think a lot of the time a person's experiences working at different places have as much to do what you want to bring to that place as the place itself. I always try and make the most of whatever happens, but I would say, certain places at challenging times, it's obviously very difficult. The hours that you work vary quite a lot, but that is generally more dependent on the project than the place, in my experience. But generally good. I legitimately do enjoy what I do, and I think I've continued enjoying it at all the different places. So I'd say quite positive.
Do you have to have a high ADAR to get into animation from university?
No. I would just say you need to have a good personal interest in, this will be the last question, good personal interest in animation and show that you're passionate about it, but what you have on paper for that stuff is not necessarily as important as what you can show you can do. So if you have a good reel, for instance, you've got a nice QuickTime movie that you've done that shows that I can believe that your stick figure character is really falling over, then that's good. Thank you again for your time, and have a great rest of the day.